Hi, everyone, and welcome to our CATIA Composer webcast. Our presenter today is John Carlson. John is the Director of Training at RAND3D, and he manages RAND3D's full-time trainers, plus helps out with classroom delivery. John started with RAND in 1996 and has over 30 years' experience teaching various CAD and data management systems. We welcome John as the presenter of our CATIA Composer webcast. So John, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Corrine. I do want to get started right away. We do have a lot to cover. It's mostly going to be a demonstration to give you an idea how the software works, but I do have just a couple slides here at the beginning. Some people may be aware of what CATIA Composer is, some people may not be, so I do want to go over that first, and then we'll get right into the demo on there. Now, the first thing is just, what is CATIA Composer? We're going to go through and look at that. We're going to look at a couple examples of what you can do with the software to give you an idea here at the beginning. And then I'm going to actually do a live demo to give you a better feel for how this actually works on here. And so we'll go through the basic view creation, how to go through and set up interactive views, how to make videos, so you have an understanding of how that's done. And then you can try it yourself. You can download the software for a 30-day free trial, and I'll show you where you can do that at the end. And you should have enough knowledge to get yourself going on Composer at the end of this. Now, the first thing is just what is Composer itself? It's really a software focused on improving the way that you create, update, and distribute 3D product information. Once you've got your design created, I want to be able to reuse these 3D models in other fashions, technical illustrations, product documentation, assembly, maintenance instructions. These are all possible reusages of that data on here. And basically what CATIA Composer lets you do is an easy-to-use software that lets you go through and do this. And again, you can then complement your existing tools that you're using, PDF, HTML, Microsoft Office. It can work in conjunction with these very easily. The 3D solid modeling has always promised great possibilities for reusing the data, but it's really been unrealized up to this point. How do I take this engineering data and repurpose it? The CAD software itself is not meant to do that. And so, yes, you have some tools inside, but they're very difficult to use. Composer is focused specifically on reusing this information to do these things. So much simpler than trying to go through and do this inside of the CAD system. And then also with CATIA Composer, there are really three main parts to the software. There's CATIA Composer itself, and that's the authoring tool, and that's actually what I'm going to be showing you today. There is a second part to the software called CATIA Composer Player, and that's a standalone player that will let you then play the things that you create inside of Composer. And this is a free player, so you can go through and use it anywhere you want. And then also there is CATIA Composer Sync, as they call it. And this is just part of the software that lets you do batch conversions. So if you've got really big models that you want to convert over into the Composer format, you could go through and use the Sync part of the software to do that. I'm actually going to go through and do it directly live in front of you in the demonstration. And then I want to get right into the software demonstration at this particular point. Okay, let's come back here. I've already got CATIA Composer started here in the background, so let me minimize my PowerPoint slide. And this is what it will look like once you get logged in. And it's very similar to the interface on any modern CAD system. You're going to have a ribbon up above here that's going to have the various tools inside of it. You're going to have some panels over here on the side on the left. You're also going to have a panel on the right. You potentially could have other panels down below. You can control the panels that you see here under this window tab. So again, if I wanted to go through and see the timeline that goes along with the videos, I could then go through and turn that panel on. Now, if I'm not working on a video at this time, I can then come over here and easily turn that off to give me more room. Now, you'll also notice the panel over here on the left, the one that's currently marked as views. This will let me show lots of different types of information. It's going to show me the product structure of the assembly. It's also going to show me collaboration items. Any notes or something or dimensions that you were to create on top of that will be collaboration. It's going to let you see your various saved views. And then also, if you've got a bill of material, you can view that information here. So you're going to use that a lot. And then down below is the property. If you were to select something on the screen, it would show you the current properties of that item and then let you go through and change them. So color, visibility of that item can easily be changed underneath there. And over here on the right is just the workshop. There is actually a workshop tab up above. There's some kind of additional areas inside of Composer that are focused on specific things. Like there's a texture library, there's an image library over here, there's a technical illustration workshop. When you go to and pick on one of these things up above, it's going to go through and bring up that workshop on the right. So what I want to do right away is I want to open up an example to give you an idea of what it actually looks like. So I'm going to come over here and just use the getting started. I'm already in here. And then when I come over here and say getting started, I'm going to come over here and say choose a sample. And again, these are samples that actually come along with the software. And so I'm going to open up this gearbox sample that you see right here. And so again, this is a CATIA Composer file that's already been created on here. Now this is where if I come back over here and look at my tab over here on the left, my panel, this is where it goes to enlist the product structure. This is the exact same product structure that you see in your CAD system on here. There's also going to be on different collaboration items. So there's areas over here, if I was to expand out over here under measurements, there are various measurements over here that you currently don't see. They're simply turned off over here. So you're going to find those in the collaboration panel on the side. And then also there are potentially saved views. There's a number of different saved views that go along with this particular model. So if I was to come over here and double click on one of these views, it would actually take me into that particular view that's been saved away. So you can then go through and navigate through the different saved views easily on the side as well. So you can see there's a number of different configurations of this created inside the Composer file. So again, you can then go through and set different properties, based upon what you want to see. You can even have cross sections like you see. Again, you can have dimensions easily created inside. You just need to double click on the view. It will take you there. And then if you do have some type of bill of material that goes along with that item, on this bill of material page, you would go through and list the bill of material that goes along. Now, I mentioned it was pretty easy to go through and change the properties. If you want to change the color of something, all you really need to do is just pick on it on the screen. And if I was to select on that particular part, I can now come over here and just change the color. Drag along here and easily go through and make that red. Or if I didn't want to go through and see one of these parts again, I could actually come over here and pick on this, and I could go through and change the opacity. Now, again, if you go through and make it 0, it's going to be see-through. If you come over here and make it 255, the highest number, you can't see through it. So you can easily change those properties inside of Composer quickly. So that's what you're seeing over there on the left. Now, I really don't need the workshop panel over here on the right, so I'm actually going to go through and turn that off right now. And I do want to actually come back over here into the view panel on the side. And I want to go back up here to this first view where we kind of started here inside. Now, I did make some modifications here, so it's asking me, do I want to save those modifications away, and I don't. So I'm going to come over here and say don't save on that view. And then we'll return back to where we started. Now, also down here in the corner, you do have a couple choices that you can choose from. I'm currently in perspective mode, but I could turn perspective mode off on here so I can switch back and forth from perspective to non-perspective. You can also turn the paper on and off. So this represents the paper, this area right here. So if you're going through and making some type of image and saving this away, you can clearly see if it's going to fit on the paper or not. But you can easily turn that on and off as well. Now, this particular presentation does have a built-in video. So if you want to play the video, this is where I would come back over to Windows, and I would now come back over here and turn on my timeline. And then down below, this is the timeline that goes along. Now notice how the timeline is currently in gray. I am currently in view mode here up in the upper left corner. I want to go into the video mode. So when I click on that button, it's going to switch now back to video mode. And then notice the timeline is available. So to play this, all I really need to do is hit the play button here, and it's going to go through then the video that's been set up. So you can see how it explodes itself. It's then going to go through and switch some views, turn some things on and off, add a few dimensions on here, rotate itself around, and then go back to where it started. Now again, that takes a little bit of time to go through and do something like that. It shouldn't take probably more than an hour or so. You could easily whip that out with a little experience in that amount of time. That's fairly straightforward there. Now, I want to give you one other example, so I'm going to go through and close this off. Another example I want to show you, I don't want to save that away, is I'm going to come back here again to my Home tab over here, and actually I'm going to go back to Workshops over here and get started. And I want to come down here to choose a sample, and I want to come over here and show you now this seat example here. Now again, once I bring this up again, there's a number of different save views over here that you can choose from, just like before. But the main thing I wanted to show you here is this particular example has what they call interactive views in it. I can actually go through and pick on these various buttons here on the screen and have then what I see change. Now, in order to be able to use these buttons, though, I need to get out of what they call design mode down below. Currently, I'm in design mode where I can physically change things. I'm going to come down here and turn this off, so now I can actually work the buttons. And so if I was to come over here and pick on this button right here, it's going to go through and change the color of the seat to red. If I was to pick this button here, turn it yellow. And if I was to pick this one, it would go back then to being black. Now over here, I've got buttons for changing. Okay, I want to go through and adjust the back of this. So as I pick the button, it moves it up and down. This is going to move the seat up and down. This is going to go through and slide it forward and backwards. So I can have these interactive views easily created then in Composer. And also there's a button down below here for going through and showing me an exploded view. Hey, I want to see this exploded. And then when I do that, it goes through and explodes it and then gives me a bill of material on there. And if I want to return back where I started, I can just go through and pick on that. It's going to return back to what I had. Now, this also does have a fairly long video inside of it as well. So to play the video, I would just hit the button down here in the corner, and it's going to start to go through the video. And this video basically shows you how you would replace the motor on the seat. So again, you would first take the seat off. You would now go through and unclip these two clips that you see here. Get them out of the way. Once they've unclipped the seats again, they're going to remove the motor holder, and then they're going to go through and show you how to remove the motor. So they're going through and kind of using this as an example of how you would go through and repair this particular item. But they're doing it graphically, so it's very easy to see. So I'm not going to play all the way through. Once they change the motor, they basically put the seat back together. I think you've got a pretty good idea of how that's done. But try creating that in your CAD system. Now, you would go crazy trying to do that. But in Composer, this will be easy. Okay, so I'm going to close that window. So now I want to actually go through and give you a live demo. Now, how can I go through and do some of these things that we've just looked at? Now, I don't want to do anything as complicated as that, just to save a little bit of time, but I want to give you a general idea of how it's done. So what I want to do is I want to come over here and actually come over and use my model browser. And actually, I'm just going to say File and use Open. I could use the model browser if I wanted to. And I want to come over here and open up the item. Now, this geometry that I'm going to use has not been converted yet into the Composer format. So I'm going to come over here and open up this CATIA model here. And there's a CATIA model here. I can find it called the section bore device. And so now when I come over here and open this, it's going to take the CATIA model and it's going to convert it into 3D XML because that's the geometry it uses inside of Composer on here. Now, this will take a little bit of time. It won't take super long, but about 30 seconds. Now, it doesn't have to be CATIA geometry. I could convert SolidWorks geometry the exact same way. I could open up Creo. I can open up Inventor. Almost any of the 3D CAD softwares I could directly open up inside of Composer. So if you've got multiple softwares back at work, you can use Composer on all of these. And so here's the geometry now it's been converted over into the Composer format. Now, I don't need to see the timeline right now, so I'm going to come down here and close the timeline because I want to talk just a little bit in this particular chapter on just some of the basic functions on here. Now, again, you've got the standard. Hey, if I hold the right mouse button down here, I can spin around. And if I go through and use the scroll wheel, I can zoom in and out. So you have all those standard functions just like you would any CAD system on here. You'll learn that pretty quick. I do want to come back over here to this Home tab again. You're also going to have these different camera views built into the system. So again, I can come back here and say, okay, give me the front back view on this particular item. You know, drop down here and say, okay, go through and give me the top bottom. You can also go through and use this little 3D compass over here on the side. This will let you go through and change as well. And then also you can come over here and go back into the 3D view where I started by picking on those save views away. You can also make your own custom views down below if you wanted to inside the system. So that's really what the align camera command does. Now you could also come over if you wanted to and make your own new views. So again, if I was to say align camera, I could put my camera up against that face. So it would now go to make that face parallel to the screen on there. So that's pretty easy to navigate around. So I'm going to come back over here to where I started, back in my 3/4 view, as they call it. Now, a couple other things you can do here. There is a select button up here. There's going to be a bunch of different options as far as selecting And then if you want to turn something on and off, okay, I don't want to see something. If I go back over here to assembly, this is the exact same tree like I mentioned earlier that I had in CATIA. Okay, I don't really want to see this one part right here. And I want to get out of a line camera. Escape will stop any command at your end. And if I was to highlight this part here, well, I could actually just come up here if I wanted to now and say, okay, I want to go through and turn that thing off. So under this visibility drop down here, I can say, okay, I want to go through and hide the selection. So that will then turn that part off. You can see all it really does over here in your tree is it just turns off the check mark over here. I can easily turn it on and off over here in the tree as well if I want. Now to turn everything back on again, I can just right-click there on the screen as well, and I can just come over under the visible drop down here and say, show me all the geometry. It'll bring everything back geometry-wise that I've hidden. Now there's also a nice, what they call ghosting option. If you want to get a better look at something behind, if you move your cursor on top of something and hit tab, it's going to ghost the item. If I move over here and hit tab, you can see how it goes through and ghosts those items so I can see what's behind. Now they're not permanently gone. If I just move off the geometry, the ghosting will undo itself on there. So that lets you kind of visualize really complicated things easier. Now you also have up above here what they call the digger. And so I'm going to go through and turn the digger on, and the digger is this ball, and I can move this digger around. And then once I get it in position here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the button on the side here called the tool button. And when I do that, it shows me the tools are on the outside of this. Now, I'm currently in what they call onion skin mode. And so when I drag this one handle, it is going back and peeling the skin of the onion away. So it's going further back into the model. Now, there are other modes over here. I could go through and do X-ray mode, and I could then go through and make an X-ray and X-rays back into the model as I drag the handle. I could also come over here and do cutting plane. I could push a cutting plane parallel to the screen back through the part. And then there's even a button over here for going through and zooming up. Okay, I want to blow up this area here and see this better. Now, one of the nice things here about the digger, now again, I can go through, of course, and make this bigger and smaller and move it around, but I can also take what's inside the digger and turn that into a picture. So if I was to come down below here and say, okay, I want to capture now what's inside the digger, it is going to go and make a new view that captures that. And I can then drag that off to the side on there. So you can actually use the digger then to explore an area. Now to move the focus of the digger, I can go through and use this one button right here, and I can point to a different location on the digger. And again, if I wanted to capture that, I could just hit the capture button, and it's going to go through and make a new image on the side. But again, notice this particular image has a tail because it wasn't right on top of it. And then again, if I don't want that tail, that's really just a property that you can easily change over here. I just don't really want to have this arc tooltip here. So you've got different built-ins that you could choose from, but I can completely turn it off as well. So you can see how quickly I can then go through and create that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I really don't want those 2D views right now, so I'm going to go through and delete those and get rid of them. So that would be what they call the digger up above. Now, I can also go through and move things around on the screen. And again, to do that, I'm going to have to change my ribbon. So I'm going to come over here under the transform ribbon. And notice I'm currently under no transformation, so I can't really move anything right now. So if I was to come over here now and say, okay, I want to do free drag, I could pick on one of these parts, so I can really just drag it anywhere on the screen if I want. So you can use these now to easily go to make exploded views of this particular item. Now, I could also come over here and turn off free drag, and I could turn on translate. And then with translate, if you go through and pick on something, it's going to go through and give you some arrows. And again, if I pick the blue arrow, it'll go up. If I pick the green arrow, it lets me control the direction that I go on there. And you can even rotate something if you want. You know, I can come over here and pick on this part and say, hey, I want to go through and rotate this around using the arcs on the outside of that. Again, if you make a mistake, oops, don't like that, again, the undo button will undo all these things. You know, I can go back with any of these things that I've done here as far as the translation on there. Now, what I want to do is I want to have an unexploded view of this, and I want to have an exploded view. So before I go through and get too carried away with my exploding, I'm going to come back over here to views, and I'm going to capture this current orientation. I'm just going to hit this view button right here, and it's going to go through and create a view over here called view number 1. Now, if I was to go through and spin this thing around, okay, I want to look at this from the back side. Okay, I want to be able to remember this position. I can now come over here and capture view number 2. So again, now if I double click on this view, it's going to take me back to that saved orientation. This will take me back to here. So once you get something you like, you just basically capture that view to go through and keep it Very easy to do. So now what I want to do is, besides individually dragging these parts, you also could potentially, back here under transform, use one of the explode choices. There's a linear explode, a spherical, a cylindrical. I'll go through and just show you linear. Now, with this particular command, you do need to select the items that you want to explode. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pick the first item here. That's the one part that I don't want to move. Let's say that's going to be my fixed part. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to go through, once I've selected it, I'm just going to click on my right mouse button, and I'm going to come here with my select drop down, and I'm going to invert the selection. It's now going to select everything else beyond that part. So now I'm going to come over and say I want to do a linear explode. And so when I come over here and pick the red arrow, notice it explodes the parts in that direction. If I go the opposite way, it's going to explode the other way. If I was to pick the blue arrow, of course, it would explode up. So it's really exploding everything that I have selected in a linear fashion in that direction. So you could use that if you wanted to, but again, unless you've got a nice straight shot, that works really well. But if you want to move things in multiple directions, then you're probably going to have to come over here and use the free drag in order to do that. So I'm actually going to undo that because I really don't like the way that's exploding. But let's just do a simple explode again. So I'm going to come back over here and do my translate. I'm just going to translate, let's say, this part up a little bit here. I'm going to take maybe this part right here, and I'm going to go through and translate it down. Let's say that's the exploded view that I want. I'm just going to come over here now and make a new image over here. So there's my new view number 3, which is the explode. But again, I can easily go back to unexploded, and then by double-clicking on this, I can then come back over here to explode inside the system. So that's basically how you would go through and capture something. Now, when you do hit this one view button, it does capture everything about the view. If I was to go through and change the color of this one particular part here and go through and make it green on here. Now, I just went through and changed this. So this is where this view 3 does not reflect that change. What I would need to do then is I would need to come over here and update the view. When I update that, it now captures the green. But now if I go back to view number 2 or view number 1, there's still going to be the gray color. So keep in mind it's capturing all the properties as they're set when you make the views. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go back over here, let's say, to view number 1. And let's go through and talk about a few of the different collaboration items that you potentially could make on here. And so I'm going to come up here under the author ribbon up above. And again, here's basically all your collaboration items, or most of them. And so one thing I can easily create is just an arrow. So again, I'm going to come over and just make an arrow. I'm going to pick where I want the arrow to start, where I want the arrow to end. Again, once you've created it, I want to stop making arrows, just hit escape. And then notice I've got my properties over here. As long as this is highlighted, I can now come over here and change the properties. Okay, so I want to come over here and change the opacity. I can go from being completely clear to completely solid on here. Okay, I want to come over here and be able to go through and change the background color. So again, I can now switch the background color on my arrow very easily on here. And so once you've got that property set, okay, I've got my arrow. Now again, there's some other types of arrows you can create. There's a circular arrow that you can do as well. Now with the circular arrow, again, you basically align it with a face, and then once you got it on the face, get the right distance up and down, and now it goes through and makes the circular arrow. Again, once you've got it created, I'm going to escape to stop building that. Again, you can now come back here and modify your properties. Now again, you can use the toolbar over here on the side. If I also zoom up on this, you can see there's some various arrows here. This lets me change the length of the arrowhead. This lets me go through and change the rotation of this. If I click on the right button here, the red one, rotate around on here. And again, this would actually be the thickness of the arrow. They're all easily changeable. But I can also find those exact same properties over here on the side. I don't want to have a border around the outside. I'm just going to turn off the border, and then it's just the arrow by itself. So pretty easy then to update the properties that go along. Okay, so let's go back to where I was with my view. So I'm going to come back over here to my Home tab, and I'm going to go back to my 3/4 view here. That actually is the wrong 3/4 view that I had. So I'll just spin that around. So I've gone through and added an arrow on there. Okay, now that I've got that, let's go back to author and look at a couple other possibilities here. Now again, I can import 2D images in. So if you've got some picture files saved away, I could import it and reuse it. I could also come over here if I wanted to and just make 2D text. Again, all you got to really do is pick where you want it to be. And I'll just call it text over here. Very easy to do. Now again, once you've created that again, I can now come over here and stop it with escape. As long as you pick on it again, I can now come over here and change all my properties, make it a bigger font, come over here and change the color of it. Again, I don't want to have the background on here. So again, I could come over here and turn the background on and off. That goes along with the text, whatever you want to see on here. Now, what if I want to change this background color that I have? I got the text background white. I want the background of the whole model to be white as well. All I got to do is pick on the background, and I can then come over here and change the background properties. All I'm going to do is change this foot color, and I'm going to come over here and change this to white. So now I have the white text on the white background. But again, I would then need to come over here and just get rid of the frame. That would be one of your attachment choices over here. Okay, don't really want the border over here, so I'm going to go through and make it 0 on the opacity scale. And I also don't want to have the shadow over here as well. Now, if you've got certain standard text that you like, I want to have text a lot that looks like that, you could then go through and save that away in a library, and you'd be able to come over and reuse that if you wanted to. So don't worry that you got to do this every time. You would just need to go through and do it once and save it away into the library. Okay, but that'll be fine for right now. Now, I can also come over and make labels. Now, again, if I just do a label and I pick on an item, notice how it just goes through and it gives me the name of whatever I selected on. So if I was to pick here, that's the base part. If I was to come over here and pick on this, that's the fixture drill part. So you can easily make a label. Now, you can come back and change that text to be whatever you want, but it will default to whatever you selected. And I can also come over here and do a call-out. Now, again, a call-out is really just a balloon, and when I go through and select on it, again, it won't put anything in there by default when you first make the call-out. Again, I'm going to stop making call-outs, but you can then come back and click in the call-out, and you can now type in whatever you want the call-out to be on here. That's another pretty common type of annotation on here. And also, again, I can come over here and make dimensions. Now, again, these will be accurate dimensions on your geometry. So, again, I want to make a diameter dimension. Now, I want to go through and know what the diameter of this is. So, again, I'll zoom up a little bit here. I'll just go through and select on that circle. Again, drag that out. That's 12 millimeters. And, again, I don't really like the way the computer's doing that. So, again, I'm going to come over here under my properties, and I'm just going to go through and change this from a double arrow to not having the double arrow. So I'll just go through and do simple on here. And, again, you'll be able to move this around wherever you want. Now, you can also go through and take, length and linear dimensions the same way on the model as well. So, again, I could come over here and say, okay, I want to go through and measure some type of length. Okay, I'm going to go through and just pick on this one edge right here, and it's going to go through and give me the length of that particular edge, and you can move it around. So that's basically how you would create dimensions onto your view. Again, I made a bunch of changes to this. I want this to be remembered now, so I've modified this view. Now, if I try and switch out of this view, I've modified it. So if I try and change into another view over here, Ada's going to come back and ask me, hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to update the current view? Do you want to save and make a new one? Or do you want to don't save this and lose all your changes? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come over here and say save, and it's actually going to go through and make a view number 4 now that has all that stuff on top of it on there. I don't quite have on view 4 there with all my things. It went around backwards there for a second. So that's how you can easily create the views inside the system. And then really the last annotation item I want to show you right now is I'm just going to switch back over here to view number 2, because you also can create cross sections here. And so if I want to go through and have a cross section, I can just come over and say create. I can just pick on a face, and you can just basically move this plane into the right location, wherever you want that to be. And you can get it to snap onto centers and holes and things as you create it as well. Now, once you've got that on there again, you can then come over and pick on the cross section. And again, you've got a number of different properties over here that you can then go through and switch. Do you want to have the cutting line? Do you not want to have cutting lines? Do you want to cap this off? Okay, what's the cap color going to be? So I could come over here and say, I just want to keep the actor color. That will go through and keep the caps the same color as the parts were. And then the other thing I'm going to do is on this kind of outline, this block outline that you see that represents the cutting plane, is I'm just going to switch the opacity here down to 0 so we don't see that. And again, I've changed that. So now again, I'm just going to come over here and say, okay, I want to update that particular view with the new cross section. Those are some of the more common collaboration items that you would go through and add in Composer. Again, to go back, just double click on the view. It's going to take you back to whatever you had set at the time that you created it. Now, the other thing is, well, I've created all these nice pictures, but how do I actually get these things out of the system on here? So I want to go through and be able to export these. So this is where, before I export them, I really want to come up here and talk a little bit, let me get back to view number 1, about some of the different render styles that you have. I'm currently in the default render style here, but if I come over here and say render, there's a number of different modes that you can choose from. I'm currently just in the smooth mode. Okay, so I want to come down here and say smooth with outline. You can see it updates and puts the outline on the view. I could also drop down here and say, okay, I want to be in shaded illustration on here, or it's more a picture that you would see in a technical manual. I could also drop down here and say, okay, I want to go through and see that with the colors, and so then it kind of keeps the colors on there. And so you've got a number of different modes that you can come down here and select and then easily switch on the system. Now, I can also mix and match these if I want some parts to be displayed one way and other parts another way. All I would need to do is come over here on my drop-downs for mode and then switch this to custom. And then once you switch this to custom, if you pick on one of the models on the screen, you can now easily come down here and change its rendering. Okay, I want that part to go through and be in silhouette. I just want that to be kind of referenced in the background. No, I don't want that to be shaded. I might do the same thing. Okay, this part right here, I want to go through and be able to do that one. I might want to come down here and say, okay, I want to go through and do, flat technical on that one. So keep in mind, you can mix and match the displays together inside. But again, what I'm going to do is I want to be able to keep this. So I'm going to go through and just make a new view up here. I'm going to save that away basically as view number 5. And then also you do have a couple other choices here. You can come back here and change the outline style. So again, I could potentially come over here and say I want sharp edges. I don't want to see them. I do want to see them. And these are different drop-down choices you can easily switch to as well. So I'll leave it here at the construction edges, which is the default. So now to export this, I've got a nice picture. I want to put this in a Word document or something. So this is where now to export it, I'm going to come up here under my workshops, and I'm going to either use the technical illustration or the high-resolution image. Now, if I use the high-resolution image over here, I can go through and just say, okay, I want to go through now and make a high-resolution image. You can get all your settings the way you want it here. And if you want to see what it's going to look like, I can just come over here and say preview. That's what my high-resolution image will look like when I export it. Now, you're not going to have this Dassault System, CATIA Composer, watermark on here. I am using an evaluation version of the software for the demo, and so you're going to see that. But on the production version, you're not going to go through and see that at all. You just have a standard gray background then. Now, I can also come over here if I want to and make a detail view. What if I want to blow up an area like I did earlier with the digger? Well, I can actually do the same thing here. I can actually go through and move this thing around, make this window bigger and smaller, and I could actually come over here, as long as I got default view turned on and say create, it's actually going to capture what was inside of that. And so that would be another way to go through and create a 2D view within this one on here. So that would be one way to go through and export the images out on there. Okay, so I'm going to go through and delete that 2D panel. I'm not going to really use that one right now. And so I'll turn off that detail view. And then the other one is the technical illustration. So this one, again, I got to make sure I've got the right settings over here. I'm just going to accept all the defaults right now. But if I was to come over here again and do preview, it's going to go through and make a technical image that goes along with this. And again, this is a little bit more printer-friendly version of that image on there. So you can go through and quickly create images with either of these here. And then also, again, you can still make a detail view here. So again, I want to make a detail view of an area. Again, move this wherever you want it to go. On here, once you got that circle around where you want it to go, you got to move the handle in the corner to do it. But you can then come over and say detail view again, create. It would now go through and create a detail view of that area within this model on here. So that's basically what you would do then to export if you wanted a static 2D image on here. Now you could also potentially just do the file save as. It would give you choices there as well for different formats. Again, I've updated this view or changed it, so I'm just going to come over and hit the update button, and that's going to update it now with the new view that I added. Now at this point, what if I get to the point where, okay, something's changed? Engineering has changed one of the parts that I did here. Do I have to do all this all over again? No, because I can go through and just change the geometry of one of the parts. And so to do that, I would really just come back over here under the Geometry tab. And with the Geometry tab, I'm going to go through and pick on this base part. basically the new model has a hole here. So I'm going to go through and say, okay, I need to update this part right here. And I'm going to come over and just use my update button. And when I say update, it lets me go through and find the new model. And so here's my new base 4 updated part. And so again, this is currently a CATIA model. So when I come over here and say I want to update that, it's going to convert it to the 3D XML, and then it's going to insert it in place of the old model. So now I've updated this view. So now I've got the new part with the hole in it. And I've updated all the views. So if I come back over here to this view that I created earlier, again, just double click on that to switch into it. It's just taking a second here. Notice I've got the hole there. Again, all these views got updated in one step. I don't have to go through and recreate everything brand new from scratch on here. Now, you may need to re-export your images if you're importing it into a Word document, but again, I could just easily come back now again under my workshops and then re-export this out. Again, when you do it, you can export them individually. You could also just export all the views at once. So if you've got lots of saved views away, you could save them all in one step very easily. So that's the first part of the demonstration I wanted to show you, just kind of the basic interface, some of the different collaboration items that you have, and how to go through and save away the views. Now, the next thing I want to show you is how to go through and use the interactive views. The interactive views was where it went through and switched from being one color to another color. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to close this off. Well, I'll save it first. So again, I'll just do my file save, and that's going to save this away as the section bore device, SMG. So that's the extension here, and I'll replace the one that I had. And I want to come over here and open up a new model. So I'm going to close this window here. Again, come over and say File Open. And so I want to come over here and go up a level. And I want to come over here. Actually, I'm going to stay at that level. But I'm going to come over here and get this interactive view. Now, this has already been converted from CATIA into the 3D XML. I just didn't want to spend the time waiting for that to happen again. But you'll see over here, I currently don't have any views. Now, there's a couple different types of views. One is when you hit the view button here, you go through and create a view that captures every property like I showed you earlier. It captures the position. If I go through and spin this thing around, though, and I come over here and change the color or something over here, it also goes through and captures the color of that particular item. So this regular view creation captures really all the properties of that. There's sometimes you don't want to capture all the properties. I'm actually going to go through and delete that. I'm going to go back over here to view number 6. What if I want to be able to go through and show this here, let's say in this position here, I'm going to update it, but I want to be able to show this thing spun around. So what I'm going to actually do here now is I'm going to come over here and create another new view, and what I'm going to do to get to some exact view, go back to home here, and I'm going to use my align camera, and I'm just going to rotate this thing around, and I'll zoom back out. So this is what I want to have now as my next view over here. But I only want it to remember this orientation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a camera view over here. Now notice the camera view has the slash going through it. So it remembers simply the position of this particular item. It doesn't remember any other property about it. If I was to come over here and make this thing green, like I showed you earlier here, if I come back over here to my view number 6, I'm not going to save this. So if I come back over here to view 8, it's not going to remember that. Even if I'd saved it, it would have went back on there. Okay, so I've got this thing reversed around right here. Now I also want to be able to show this thing exploded and unexploded. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go back here to my view number 6, and I'm going to go through and explode this out. Now I'm not going to really make much of an exploded view. I'm actually going to capture another view here real quick. I'm going to go through and do capture here. And what I want to do is I want to capture the position of the items. So I'm going to come back up here now to my workshop tab, and there's actually a tab up here for creating views. In these views, I can create just certain items. I'm going to actually highlight everything, and I want to come over here and for the actors over here, and I only want it to remember location over here. So all this view is going to do is remember that everything's put together. And I'm just going to come over here now and say create. So I've got this view number 1 over here, which is basically my unexploded view. So now that I've done that, I'm going to come back and make another view here real quick where I'm going to move these things apart. So again, I'll go back over here to my transform, and again, I'm just going to do a quick translate. I'm going to go through and translate this part up. I'm going to take this part here and translate it down. It won't be much of an exploded view, so that's going to be my exploded view. So again, I'm now going to come back over here and say, okay, I want to go through and capture the position now of all these items. I'm going to highlight them all, and I'm going to come over here and say create another one. So that's actually going to go through and be my exploded view over here. So now if I come back over here to view number 6, again, that's going to put everything back the way it was. If I come over here now and pick the explode view, it's going to explode it. If I was to pick view number 8, it's going to rotate it around. And if I was to go through and pick view number 1, it would put it back together on here. So you can see how these views are simply remembering the location or the orientation, nothing else on the item, whereas that view remembers everything about it. So I'm going to be able to choose from exploded and unexploded. And I also want to be able to, say, have views that capture color on here. So again, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to highlight basically the entire assembly over here. And I'm just going to come over here and say, okay, I want to be able to have a red one and I want to be able to have a blue one. So here's my red version of the assembly. So what I'm going to do now is, again, over here under my view profile, is I'm going to come over and say I want to capture material. That's going to actually be the color. But I don't want to capture location anymore. So now again, when I come over here and say, okay, create a view, then I've got a view over here for red. And I'm going to go through and do the same thing for green. I'm just going to come over here and change everything to green on here. And then once I've done that again, come over here and save this away again. So I've got a view that captures green. So now again, I'm able to come over here. I'll make this a little bit bigger so I can see these side panels better on here. So again, now I've got one that I can go through and make this thing red over here. If I double click on it, I got one over here that I can go through and I can explode it. I got one that makes it blue, whether it's exploded or not, or green. I've got one over here that puts it back together on here. So you can see I've got these different interactive views now that lets me switch between the different settings on here. Now, this is where I want to have buttons on the screen that will let me go through and change all this. And so I'm going to go through and do one more thing here, is I'm going to go through and make a piece of text on here. So I'm going to go back over here to my render over here. Actually, not render, but geometry. Actually, it's going to be author. And then make my 2D text. And I'm just going to come down here and make a piece of text here, which is going to go through and be reset on here. And what this is going to do is this is going to reset everything back here to the beginning on here, eventually, if I spell reset correctly with that. Then again, I'll make it a little bit bigger just so you can see it better on here as well. And then what I want to do is I want to start to add these interactive views out here. And so what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to come over and I can actually drag these views onto the screen over here. So I want to have a button here that will let me go through and rotate this thing around. So again, I'm going to come back over here and do Control, and I'm going to drag view number 8 out here. I want to highlight this view first. And so I'm going to have a button now that will go back to this one original rotated position on here. If I come over here and drag this one out over here, remember this is the unexploded view. I'm going to go over here and do Control again. I'm going to drag this one over here to this side. I'm going to come over here and also drag this view, which is the exploded view over here. So I'm going to be able to choose from explode, unexplode using those two views. And then down below here, I'm going to go through and drag out the red, and I'm going to go through and drag out the green. I got to do Control again when I'm dragging to get that to stick right here. And so I got both of them highlighted, so it's dragging them both out on here. So you can move these onto the screen. You can then go through and move them around, you know, wherever you wanted these to be on the screen as well. Now, once you've got these positioned, because I went through and reused these views, if I was to pick on one of these views here, if I go down below here, notice there's actually what they call a link. When I pick on this, it's going to go back to view number 1, and view number 1 was the unexploded. If I pick on this, notice the link says it's going to go to view number 2 right here. When I pick on this, it says it's going to automatically go to view 3. So that's how it's actually going to switch then. There's a link built into those items when I select on. Now, this word reset is going to take me back here to view number 6. I want to start all over again on here. But this does not have an automatic link built in. But if I scroll down here, I can create a link. It's currently linked to nothing, but I'm going to come over and say I want to make a link, and I don't want to make it to a URL, but I want to make a link over here to a view. So you can basically link to something else in Composer, so view number 6. So now when I go through and say, okay, it is now linked to that. So I've gone through and set up my interactive views. Now, to test this out, what I want to do is I do want to first save this away. I went through and I changed this view. So this is where I'm going to come over here and highlight view number 6, and I'm going to go through and do my update button. It's going to update that view now with all the things, those new buttons that I placed on the screen. Now, to run this, I need to get out of design mode. Right now, design mode lets me change things. I want to go back here where I can just pick on it. So if I come back here and turn that off, if I was to go through and pick on this button here, it's going to turn it around. If I pick on this button here, it's going to explode it. If I pick on this button here, it's going to unexplode it. This will turn it green. This will go through and turn it red. If I want to go back to everything, or the way it was originally, I can just pick on the reset button right here. Then we'll turn it back originally. So that's how you would go through and set up kind of an interactive web page or something inside of Composer. And then the last thing I want to show you, I only got about 15 minutes here, so I'm going to go pretty quick, is I do want to show you a little bit with the video. Now again, to speed this process up, I'm going to save this away really quickly. I did go through and create a couple things beforehand here on the video, not a whole lot, but I'm going to actually open up an existing file here. And I'm going to go up a level and then come down here to my video folder. And I'm going to go through and open up my board device video SMG. So again, I've already converted the geometry here. And you'll notice I've got a number of different saved views on here. So again, I got a view number 1 here, that's that orientation. I got this thing in that position, that thing here. So I've got these different saved views. And I'm going to use these to help me create the video on here. Now, what I want this thing to do is I want to basically have this thing rotate around. It's also going to come over here and switch into the front view. And then there's also going to be a dimension I want to appear here at that particular point in the video. Now, since I want to go through and make a video, I am going to come over here and switch into video mode. Now, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller over here. And so when I come over here and switch now into video mode, it switches into video. And I also want to come over here and turn my timeline back on, which I closed. So I'm going to go back over here to Window and then turn that back on. Okay, and you can see I currently have nothing in the timeline. But what I'm going to do is I want my video to start here with view number 1. So I'm going to go through and drag this view down here, and that's going to be my start on here. Now, for the first 1 second of my video, I don't want anything really to happen. I want to just keep this orientation. So I'm actually going to drag this down here to time number 1. So the first 1 second, really nothing is going to happen in my video. And then I want this thing to start to spin around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take view number 2 here, and I'm going to drag this over here to time number 2. So it's going to take 1 second to rotate to that position. I'm going to have this move fairly quickly just so it goes fast. And then for view number 3 here again, I'm going to drag this down here to that position. So now it's going to take 1 second to rotate to that position that you see. Now what I want it to do is I want it to stay at this position here, let's say for a little bit of time. So I'm actually going to drag another view 3 down here at time 5. So it's going to actually pause for 2 seconds in this position. And then I want it to complete rotating around. So I'm going to come over here and go to view number 4 on here. And then one more view back to view number 1. Okay, what is this going to go through and look like? So let's come back here and play this. I'm going to jump back here to the beginning. And if I just hit the play button here, this is where it's going to start to rotate around. It's going to pause for 2 seconds. It's then going to complete the rotation all the way around on here. So that's really what I have so far. So I'm quickly using these views to get those positions set up in the video. Now I can also manually capture all these positions if I wanted to. That's what these other buttons down below here in the timeline would do. I could capture positions and cameras with the various buttons down below. The video is the hardest thing to do. It takes a little bit of practice. Now, once it gets to the end here, so if I go back here to that next event, I want to come over here and switch into the front view. So again, it's not going to go through and rotate into the front view. It's going to take a second. And then what I want it to do is I want it to stay in the front view here for 2 seconds. I'm going to come over here and drag that to 10. And I'm going to zoom out here just a little bit here on my timeline. I can just scroll wheel to zoom. And then once it goes here, I want it to go back to the original orientation. I want it to come over here to view number 1 on here. So now if I come back and replay this, it's going to start to spin around again, just like before. It'll pause for a couple of seconds there. Go to that view. and then turn back on. Now, at this point, there was that one dimension that you may have noticed originally when I first logged in here on this one. So if I come back over here under my measurement tab, there is this one dimension that we're currently not seeing because it's currently not turned on in any of these views. So when I get to this one position here, I'm going to back up again where I'm in this 2D view. I want this dimension to turn itself on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my timeline out here just a little bit. I can actually drag this blue line. I can select it correctly here along my video, and it actually turns it. You can see as I do that. So when I get to this point here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick on this dimension, and I want to come over here now and use this one drop-down button here, and I want to actually do an effect on that thing. And what I want to do is I want to go through and do a fade in. I want that thing to appear. And so it's going to have this thing fade in as it goes along on here. So it's not going to be displayed, and then it's going to start to be displayed on here at that point. Now, it is also going to start to fade itself out as it goes along on here. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to manually set up. I don't want this thing to fade itself out as it goes to the next frame, right, that quickly. So I'm going to come down here and change the opacity up here in my timeline manually to be 255. So it's going to be completely visible for that length of time. And then I want it to start to fade away at that point. So now I got that highlighted. I'm just going to come over here rather than do a fade in. I'm going to come over here and do a fade out on here. And so it's then going to go through and take that amount of time basically to go through and fade itself out. And again, I can readjust these timeline positions here if I want just by dragging them in the video. But that's probably the most challenging part is just, paying attention to all your different events and actors and making sure that you've got them, turning themselves on and off at the correct time in the video on here. Now, with all of that, I went through and pre-created some views. So that was really easy to do. I can also manually do something. What if I get to this point here and I want this thing now to start to explode itself at this point? So again, this is where I can come back and I can manually capture things. Okay, at this time 12, it's all together. I'm going to drag my timeline here into the right position. So I want to drag this to about 13-second point here. And I'm going to turn off auto keys. I can have the computer automatically capture what I've done, but I'm going to actually manually capture it so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing. And what I'm going to do is just come back over here to transform, and I'm going to take this item, and I'm going to go through and transform it with my translate command, and I want this thing to go up on here. I'm only going to move the one part to save some time. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through down below now, and I'm going to go through and make what they call a location key. It now remembers that location on here, and it actually adds that little triangle down below to represent that. Now I'm going to go through and slide this thing out here, move this back over here, let's say about another second here. I'm going to slide this over here to the right or left now, and I'm going to come back here and make another location key. So now it remembers that position at that location. I actually hit the wrong thing, but I'm going to do a location key. Actually, I captured them all. Let me undo what I just did on here. Okay, let me come over here and move my timeline to the right spot. Now let me move this to the right spot. I wasn't paying attention again. And now I want to come down here again, and I want to go through capture and set a location key for that item that's highlighted. And I'm going to go through again and move this out one more time out here to about 15 seconds. And I'm going to go through and then move this thing down on here. And then once I get there, that's the last position now that I want to go through and capture on here. So now if I look at this, if I just drag my timeline back here, you can see how I'm getting the wrong thing selected. You can see I'm just going to go through when it gets to this point, it's going to explode itself out on here. Now, once it explodes out, what if I want this thing to go back together on here? Well, I've already got keys over here that let me go through and explode this thing. You can actually go through and reuse these keys. Now, this is where I only want to see the keys that go along with this one actor. So I've got that part highlighted. And if I come over here and hit this one button, it's only going to show me keys that go along with that actor. If it doesn't belong to that part, I don't see it on the timeline. But what I can actually do then is I can take all these keys here that go through and set the location, and I can actually drag them and move where they are in the timeline. I don't really want to do that. But I can also copy these. So if I just drag them, it's going to move them. But if I go through and do control, I'm actually going to go through and copy this out to here, right here. Actually, let me move a little bit farther there. And then once I moved it there, oops, actually I didn't do control there. I was holding my shift key down. I've copied those. Now again, if I just leave it the way it is, it's going to do the same thing. So what I'm actually going to do now is I've got those things highlighted. I'm just going to right-click on here, and I'm going to say I want to invert the time selection. It's going to invert those choices that were highlighted and make them go back. So now, if I come over here, this is going to explode, but then it's going to go back because of the way I've got this set up. Okay, so let's play this entire thing. Let's go back here to the beginning, hit my play button. Again, it's going to go, and I don't want anything to be highlighted here when I do that. Going to rotate around, going to pause for a second, going to continue to rotate. It's going to go to my 2D view. It's going to turn my dimension on, turn it off, and then it's going to go through and explode, and then unexplode to plate. So that's the video that I wanted to go through and show you. So you can see that took a little bit of time. That was relatively simple. A little bit of practice, though, you can actually get the videos created pretty quickly in the system. You know, just think about trying to do that in your CAD system, and you would go insane trying to do that, and you probably couldn't even do it with the tools you have available. So as far as my demonstration, that's the last thing I wanted to show you. And then again, you can easily export this video out. You can put it into a Word document. You can put this into a PDF with the player. So the player can be embedded in a lot of different files, and I can play this exact same video, those interactive views, in other documents. It doesn't have to be inside a composer. Okay, so Corrine, if there's any questions, I will let you ask those.
Excellent. Thanks, John.